last week?
Yes, we've got an inverter.
Ah, okay, which obviously clicked in.
Some
And
of the
Vicky,
things are connected, not
'cause
every.
we watched the recording on YouTube.
Yes.
I think we're on. Oh no, we're on YouTube already. It's we watched the recording on YouTube, and I noticed that you and Vicky, I think, were the only ones that were still on. And Sheila, yeah.
No, the rabbi was like saying everybody's like.
Yeah,
fading.
no, we were kicked off until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Anyway,
Yeah.
what can you do?
What can we do?
All right, I'm going to keep quiet because I don't feel like being on YouTube. Be
Baruch
well.
Hashem. Be well. Wonderful Shabbos.
Okay, my love. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry about that. I just, for some reason, I was blocked out. I apologize. It's like an amazing thing that you learn with all of this technology here is when people don't want you, they can just give you the wrong password. You know what I mean? It's like, it's unbelievable. So I do apologize. I'm sorry. I was battling to get on. I called Sharon. I think she's probably still trying to get me in, but somehow it worked now. So sorry for the late start. Is everybody okay? There's somebody waiting there. Let's just let everybody in. Good. All right. In the parsha that we're going to read on this coming Shabbos, which is the parsha of Yisro, we read once again about the giving of the 10 Commandments, the giving of the Torah. And I think that everybody knows that the 10 Commandments start with the first command or commandment, which doesn't sound like a commandment at all, but that commandment is, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. God says, I am the Lord your God. That's the commandment. What does it mean? It means that we have to have a cognitive approach, a mental approach to bringing the concept of God and godliness and one God and the fact that there is nothing else, that there is only God. We have to consciously bring that to the uppermost annals of our minds every single day. It's the mitzvah of knowing that there is one God. It's the mitzvah of comprehending that there's one God. And it's the mitzvah of recognizing that there is nothing else but God. How do we do it? One of the ways we do it is by enforcing that twice a day we say the Shema. And if you take a look at the Shema and you look at that first verse of the Shema, it says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. What are we saying? Listen, Israel. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Why do we have to keep on repeating that? Because that is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to not only say it, but comprehend it, understand it, know what it means, meaning that Hashem is one. Now, if we were to take the concept of being one or number one, it could be spelled out in many, many different ways. If I'm number one, it could mean that there is a number 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and 7 as well. That's not the meaning here. The meaning here of this oneness of God is that God is everything. God is not only one as in number one, but God is one as in unified, and there is nothing else other than that one. Everything is part of this one. You are part of this one. I am part of this one. The computer in front of me is part of this one. Everything is part of the one that we call God. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is everything. Now, you and I also know that the word one, Echad, starts with an aleph. And an aleph, the letter aleph, is one. And so Torah begins, the commandments begin by God saying, Anochi, I am the Lord your God, with a letter aleph. Now, there's a famous story of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was looking for a teacher for his son, who then went on to become the next Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber, who was his successor. And as a young man, as a child, the Alter Rebbe was looking for somebody who would be a fitting melamed, a good teacher for his son. The kid was special, he was gifted, he was a brilliant boy, the Rebbe's son, and he wanted to make sure that he had a good teacher. He picked a young man who was known to be a good malamed, a good teacher, and he famously said to him, I have a mitzvah that we say about in the Shema of teaching my son. The Dibarta Bom, I've got to teach them. You have a mitzvah of having to earn a living to support your family. He said to him, let's swap. I'll pay you and you teach my son. It was a cute way of him telling him that he wanted him to be his son's malamed. He wanted him to be his son's teacher. The young teacher said to him, fine, I'll take on the job. The only thing is, I want you to tell me what you want me to learn with him. What should I study with your son? So he said, I tell you what I want you to study with him. I want you to start from the beginning. I want you to start teaching him from Aleph Beis. Okay. And he kind of knew pretty well that the young man at that stage knew Aleph Beis very well. I don't know about your kids, but our kids went to school, and Aleph Beis you learn pretty early on in the child's upbringing. Today at nursery school, they're teaching kids Aleph Beis when they're 3 years old. And that's what it should be. From age 3, you start teaching Aleph Beis. It doesn't have to wait until they go to school and they start learning ABC and they learn to read and write. Aleph Beis can be taught to kids when they're 3, and that's a good old Jewish tradition. We do it as child's optionish. When we have the child's haircutting, we teach them Aleph Beis, and they're learning Aleph Beis. They knew this kid was over 3 years old. He knew Aleph Beis. So he pushed the Alter Rebbe a little bit, and he said to him, Aleph Beis, you want me to teach him from Aleph Beis? What do you mean? And he said to him, teach him in this derech, in this way. You say to yourself, and you say to the child, Vos is an Aleph? What is an Aleph? So I want you to picture in your mind's eye now, you ladies, I want you to picture, what is an Aleph? Take a letter Aleph. Think about what it looks like in the classical way that it's written, like in your Siddur or your Chumash. How's the Aleph written? If you look at an Aleph doesn't only have a sound value, like a letter A. It doesn't only have a number value. We know that it's number 1. But an Aleph also has a picture value. It's got an artistic value. It looks like something. And what does it look like? Well, think about it. I'm not asking you to close your eyes, because then I'm going to think you're falling asleep. But I would like to ask you just to think about the picture, the image of a letter Aleph. What's a letter Aleph? What does it look like? Okay? So it's got, if you think about the letter Aleph, when you teach it to kids, you tell them, can you see other letters embedded within the letter Aleph? Hebrew is made up of a lot of other letters that seem to be kind of embedded or superimposed one upon the other. And here's one of them. The letter Aleph actually has 2 yuds in it. There is a yud on the top. If you think about the structure of the letter Aleph, there's a yud on the top. And that yud on the top may look a little bit cockeyed, a bit inverted. It's connected to a line that goes down at an angle across the middle. And then there's another yud on the foot at the bottom. And so you've got 2 yuds joined together by something that looks like a letter Vav, the 6th letter of the alphabet, the letter Vav, standing at an angle. So you've got a yud on the bottom, you've got a yud on the top, and you've got an Aleph, almost like an X, but not quite an X, right? You know what I'm talking about, the letter Aleph. So he says, now you tell him, was is an Aleph? An Aleph is a yud oben, und a yud unten, und a kaf be'emtza. There is a yud on the top and a yud on the bottom and a line that joins them in between. What is the yud above? The yud above, and here there were 2 interpretations that the Alter Rebbe gave him. The yud above is your animal soul, your godly soul, really. Your yud above is your godly soul, your godliness. The yud below is your animal soul. There's a line that joins them in between. That's you. And you are at all times beckoning with these two souls that are kind of pulling you in different directions. The one on the ground, the one reaching for the stars, or reaching for Shamayim, and the line in between, which is you, that they are battling for possession of. So that's one image of the Aleph. But let's go for a higher message. And he said, the Yud up above is God. The Yud down below is you. And the line in between is the Torah that goes between us and the mitzvahs that connect us. I've told you before, the best translation of a mitzvah is a connector, a connection, not a good deed, not a command or a commandment, but a connection. And it plays out, by the way, in that first mitzvah. The mitzvah is, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You remember, you learned that at school. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. That is the mitzvah. It doesn't say to do anything. It doesn't say that's a good deed. The mitzvah is, I am God, I'm one. That's the mitzvah. There is something that we've got to do in order to bring this mitzvah to fruition. That's the connection that we have between ourselves and God. So there's God up above, us below, the Torah and the mitzvahs in between. That's what binds us together. Those are the connections. The connection points of God to us is through his Torah. The connection point from us to God is through the Torah. That's how we connect. This is the Aleph. So he said, before you get started with anything else, you got to know what we're doing here in the first place. Why are we learning Torah? Why are we involved in all the other mitzvahs? Why are we thinking about, or what are we thinking about with everything else? The basics comes down to the fact that this is all about us and God, us and Hashem, and our connection, the connection between us, and how we can do whatever we can to embroider upon that connection, to make that connection stronger, as God is doing from Shamayim to make the connection stronger. This is an Aleph. That's what an Aleph is really all about. And that's the first letter that Hashem says in pointing at himself. He says, God says, so to speak, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. And I want you to understand that this letter Aleph, embedded within that, is how we can and we should and we need to connect on every possible level. If we think about the message of the Ten Commandments and this coming Shabbos has another very important shlav. There's another very important dimension to the coming Shabbat. And that is, it's on this Shabbos that we bench the new month of Adar. Believe it or not, we are saying the bracha for the month of Adar, and I don't want to be a prophet of doom or remind you of things that make you upset, but just remember that it was in the month of Adar that the lockdown began for the first time last year, immediately after Purim. We are headed towards that date of Purim once again, where it seems that the pandemic sort of all blew out of all proportion and became something that has dominated our lives for the last year. Yeah, believe it or not, a year ago, Shabbos Mevorchim, on the Shabbos on which we blessed the new month of Adar, a year ago, we didn't know about pandemics. We were laughing that there were some people who thought that it was going to take the world by storm. And I remember clearly, even to our Purim Megillah, there were a couple of guys who walked in with masks on, and I remember that they were ridiculed. I mean, they weren't wearing fancy dress masks. They were wearing surgical masks, you know what I mean? And people laughed at it. Think about what's happened now. Now we're angry and we laugh at people who are not wearing the masks, rather how everything has turned around. That's quite an amazing thing. But it's Shabbos Mevorchim. On this Shabbos, we bless the new month. And the new month of Adar is a significant month in that it is called the month of Simcha. It's the month of joy. Every Jewish month has a certain character. Have you ever thought about it? Every Jewish month has a character. The character of the month of Tishrei is dominated by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it's like quite serious. There's like a seriousness to it, and we know we're on trial for our lives, and things could go either way, right? There's like this feeling of trepidation that we certainly have, and we should have. It's a serious time, month of Tishrei. If we think about the month of Nisan, it's the Pesach month, the month in which Pesach occurred. So first of all, as you're sitting here, you're probably starting to get the feeling in your nostrils of the smells of Pesach food cooking, etc., and the taste of matzah and wine and so on. That's what dominates that month. But it's really the time of redemption. The thing that dominates is the idea of getting out of Egypt. That's what we're talking about when we come to the month of Nisan. When we think about the month of Adar, the dominant feature of the month is Purim. What happened on Purim? On Purim, the entire Jewish people, every Jew everywhere in the world, there was never such a decree, even under Hitler, Yamach Shmei, or other persecutors who've tried to destroy the Jewish people. They never had as good a chance, by the way, of destroying the Jewish people as Haman and Achashverosh did, where they had dominion over every Jew everywhere in the whole known world, and they could have done it. And yet, the whole thing turned around by a series of miracles and strange and interesting occurrences that happened along the way, and everything was turned around, and it became a day and a time of great celebration called Purim. And that dominates this month of Adar. Remember, that was the month that was drawn in the lots, that Hashem said, so to speak, because it was drawn in the lots, that, or this is the way that Haman interpreted it, that the whole Jewish people are going to be destroyed. That was what he asked his lottery to make a finding on, and the lots were drawn and it came out as Adar. And he said, wow, that's fantastic. Isn't this amazing? God has decided that the Jewish people will be destroyed in the month of Adar. And he said, you know what lines up so perfectly and so beautifully is that it lines up exactly with the day or the time on which Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of all Jewish leaders, died. He died on the 7th of Adar, and Haman and all his king's horses and all his king's men started a great old celebration because they said, look at the synchronicity here. Adar has been picked. This is the day of sadness, of mourning that the Jewish people must have for the death, the departure of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses died at that time. And it was kind of embedded with the sad and terrible, tragic kind of overtone at the time of Haman and Achashverosh. But what happened? The whole thing was turned around. Now, sages are very quick to point out that what Haman didn't know was that although it was Moshe Rabbeinu's Yortzeit on the 7th of Adar, but Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, didn't only die on the 7th of Adar, but he was also born on the 7th of Adar. It's his birthday too. And so very often, sometimes, when you think about God's deliverance of a message that seems to us to be negative, actually, it's a message of birth. Actually, it's a message of rebirth. And as we look at, and as we looked at, and we see the story of Purim really is about the fact that we were at the depths of difficulty, of depression, of sadness, and every single Jewish life was under threat at that time. But this became the very time of the greatest simcha for the Jewish people, where every life was saved, where everything was turned around, and where tragedy was turned into joy. That's what the real essence of this month is all about. And it's on this Shabbos, that we bless that month. And we kind of are already, what does it mean to bless something? Have you ever thought about, I'm sure you have, what does it mean where you get or you give a blessing? What are we actually doing? Do I have the power? So I'm a Kohen. Do I have the power to actually give blessings to you, to anybody? Is that something that is vested within me? I think not. What we do have, though, is God has blessed us, Kohanim, and each individual as well, with the ability to access the energy of blessing that Hashem has above, and we can draw it down through certain things that we say, through certain codes, through certain words, through certain things that we do and we say. So the Kohanim are given a formula, and the formula is Yivarechacha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'chonecha, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. We're given those words, and we're told that by saying those words and having in mind every Jew who is sitting in front of you, or standing in front of you, or in your environment, or all the Jewish people out there, or the whole world out there, for that matter, you have the ability, by saying those words, to access this wellspring of kedusha, of holiness, and of blessing, that through those words and through you doing what you do, you can access it and bring it down. Now, if we think about it, that is the power of blessing all the time. Even, by the way, when you make a bracha, when you make a blessing, you say a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. What are we doing? What are we doing? Are we just acknowledging something? So we're taking something, we're saying, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh bidbaro. What does that mean? Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who's made things, by his power of speech, he made everything. What are we saying? Yay, God, thanks, well done. No, we're actually drawing down an energy that exists in Shamayim, in heaven, in the godly spheres. We're drawing it down through that item, and we're saying, God, this is not only a testimony to your power and to your ability to create and so on, but this is actually, I'm using this as a cup of blessing for everything, for everybody. That's what we do when we sanctify Shabbos, we make Kiddush. And it's what we do on the Shabbos before a month. Every month, we say a blessing. That blessing is not only praises of God for having spared us and brought us to this occasion and all those wonderful things, but we are accessing and drawing out of the heavenly realms the whole atmosphere and wherewithal for this month to actually exist. We are participating in the atmosphere, the attitude, the stance of this particular month by us saying that blessing, and we do it every Shabbos before a new month, with the exception, by the way, of Tishrei, when we believe that God does that himself, and that's why we don't do it. But otherwise, we say this blessing. We are imploring God to open up these treasure troves and deliver as much simcha as possible on this month, open up the treasure troves and bring out the very character of the month of Adar that stands ahead of us. We're asking God to do that. And when do we begin that? A week before. So next Friday and Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh, but already on the Shabbat before, because the Shabbos before something happens blesses whatever happens in that week. That's what we're doing. And we're saying this blessing, asking God, imploring God, helping God to open up that treasure trove of blessing and bring it over the entire month. And that's what we do on this coming Shabbos. And there's a very, very special power, if you think about it, in a Shabbos that contains within it the 10 Commandments, the time that God gave us the Torah. And it's on this month that we bless the new month of Adar. There is something very, very powerful here. And that is that simcha, joy, positivity, except in a COVID sense. It's not good to be positive when you go for a test now, but it's good to be positive in all other things. Positivity and the energy of a positive outlook and the energy of a happy disposition and the energy of looking for the good within everything and the joy, the simcha that nourishes and brings up within us and makes within each and every one of us, this energy of joy, of simcha, is something that's supposed to dominate our lives always. We're never allowed, sounds strange, but a Torah point of view, we're not allowed to be depressed. We're not allowed to be sad. Yes, of course, there are things that upset us. Of course, there are things that make us feel down. But we've always got to know that the positive dominates the negative, that the power of simcha dominates all else, and that the whole job of a Jew actually is contained within the message of Purim, which is v'nahapachu, which means turnaround time, from sadness to joy, from darkness to light, from negative to positive. This is the time of turnaround, and nothing would make us happier than being able to just turn everything around and bring the absolute unbridled joy that we hope and we pray for every step of the way. I'm speaking to you today on the 22nd day of Shvat. And the 22nd day of Shvat is the Yortzeit of the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushke Schneerson. Now, this was a unique Rebbetzin. You know, my wife is often called by people Rebbetzin. Why? Because you become a Rebbetzin by being married to a rabbi. No qualifications. You didn't go to school to become a Rebbetzin. You married a rabbi, you become a Rebbetzin. So it's one of those things that you get just by being, and actually, if you think about it, I don't think it happens in any other profession. A doctor's wife is not a doctortzin. A lawyer's wife is not a lawyertzin. A plumber's wife is not a plumbertzin. But the wife of a rabbi is called a Rebbetzin. What did she do to deserve it? What did she do to get it? So there are a lot of Rebbetzins, including, I will tell you, my own wife, who is very against being called Rebbetzin. She doesn't want to be called Rebbetzin. She says, I'm not a Rebbetzin. I'm not a whatever. I want to be known by my name. Call me Masadi. That's what she always says, right? Don't call me Rebbetzin. Why? Because it's like, I think she also has this idea that a Rebbetzin is old and grey and so on, and you want to stay young and young and pretty. That's the view of a Rebbetzin. But what is a real Rebbetzin? A real Rebbetzin, I think, is a Rebbetzin like our Rebbetzin Chaya Mushke, who was not only the daughter of a Rebbe, but she also was the wife of a Rebbe. So she was the daughter of the previous Rebbe, and she was the wife of the next Rebbe. In fact, it was really through her, kind of, that the lineage passed, although the Rebbe himself was actually a cousin of hers, so they were all descended from a few generations back of Lubavitcher Rebbes anyway. So there was a family lineage, but her merit was really that she was the daughter of a Rebbe, and she was the wife of the Rebbe. But if we think about her life and the things that she stood for and so on, there are very few people who can carry the accolade of being known as a Rebbetzin, as in the real sense of the word, that she was a Rebbe in her own way from a woman's point of view. There are few people who would have carried it off with such aplomb and such a qualification on every level than the Rebbetzin herself. Interestingly enough, and I have this on very good authority, my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, used to work at a doctor's office in Crown Heights. And she once got the fright of her life because an elderly lady called up and said she wanted to see the doctor. She wanted to make an appointment. And she said, okay, and what's the complaint? And she was the receptionist. This is what you need, etc., etc., etc. So she said, okay, you can come in, like tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. And who is calling? She said, it's Mrs. Schneerson from President Street. That was how she spoke about herself. She was Mrs. Schneerson from President Street. There was never, she never called herself the Rebbetzin, and she didn't say it's Rebbetzin Schneerson. She didn't say clearly that would have opened all sorts of doors and got her an appointment ahead of anybody else in Crown Heights, but she called herself Mrs. Schneerson from President Street. That was the way she saw herself. And in fact, she kept probably the lowest profile of any Rebbitzin. I mean, today, modern Rebbitzins are on Zoom and they're on WhatsApp and they're giving shiurim and they're doing all sorts of stuff. I think that's what most modern Rebbitzins are doing. The Rebbe's wife, the Rebbitzin, stayed completely out of public life. She did nothing from a public point of view. In fact, and here is something that is maybe very surprising to many people. I don't know if she ever appeared in shul, even on Yom Kippur. She may have gone privately that nobody knows about to a small little shtibel down the road, but certainly not in the Rebbe shul where there were thousands and thousands of Hasidim. She never came there, not even on Yom Kippur. She never appeared at any of the Rebbe's Farbrengens, where the Rebbe spoke to thousands of people on a special occasion. The Rebbetzin was never there. And you might say, how sad. Yes, it was sad from a personal kind of a point of view, that here was this woman who was completely and absolutely out of the picture, so to speak. But having said that, she was really, and it became very apparent in the way that the Rebbe spoke about her after she passed on, that she was the real power, if you wish, behind the throne. The Rebbetzin was the Rebbe's only real confidant. The Rebbe didn't speak to anybody about personal matters, about private things, or even to bring somebody in on something that he was planning, except for his wife, except for the Rebbetzin. So not only was she brilliant and humble, and all sorts of other accolades that we could say about her, but she was really the energy and the power, truly, behind everything that the Rebbe did and the Rebbe stood for. Every one of the Rebbe's campaigns, he would run by her. He would speak to her about it. She was the one who advised. She was the one who gave the input. And I'll tell you something else interesting. We've all had this, I guess, where a husband is out at work and so on, and is out late at night, etc. The Rebbetzin used to wait for the Rebbe to come home, and sometimes the Rebbe came home at 7 o'clock in the morning after having given Yechidus the whole night, and the Rebbetzin was there waiting for him, and she always said she needed to be presentable in order to welcome her husband home. Absolutely incredible. She had no children, and she said, the Hasidim, they are all my children. Now, we didn't really know that much about the Rebbetzin until she passed on, sadly, and then the Rebbe started opening up and talking more, of course, never revealing anything that was of a personal nature, of a private nature, but just of the real greatness of this woman, of this incredible Rebbetzin, the power that she had as a private, modest, quiet, unseen character was really the image that we have of really, really powerful people within any realm of life, I guess, and particularly within Judaism. There are very often people who are out there and who are shouting from the treetops and so on, and everybody knows about them. And I'm not in any way belittling anybody in that kind of a realm, but there are sometimes the very quiet, unseen people who really pack the bigger punch and are much more powerful in the accomplishment of everything that we as a Jewish people or as a nation or as a people per se are trying to accomplish or trying to achieve. And the Rebbetzin was this in every possible way, in every possible fashion. It may surprise you to know that the Rebbetzin drove her own car. She drove in a big car that she used to drive. It may surprise you to know that she was, up until very late on in her life, she was a librarian in a public library. She used to get in her car and go off to the public library where she served as the librarian. And she always wanted to be persona not non grata, but persona. She wanted to be I don't know what the word is, but incognito. She never wanted people to know who she was. In fact, they tell the story that she used to go shopping. She never went shopping in Crown Heights because people would favor her and would see her and would know who she was. She used to go shopping out of town. So she went shopping in Williamsburg, and she was spotted there, and she was greeted by another great Rebbitzin who knew who she was and said, Rebbitzin Schneerson, and so on. And she told her driver afterwards, who was helping her with the peklach, she said she's never going to shop there again. She doesn't want to be recognized. She didn't want recognition. And so the Rebbe kept to that, and the only recognition he really gave her was after her passing. While it might strike some people as being sad, I think that it fits so well into the concept of Purim and the concept of Adar and the concept of Shabbos Mevorachim and the concept of this V'na'apechu, the days before Purim, where we're really thinking about how we can take darkness and we can turn it around. Because we really got to see, or an introspection or an insight into the Rebbitzин's life after her yahrzeit, after her passing. We really got to appreciate what she was all about. And yes, I'll go with you that we can say how sad and it seems unkind, it seems unfair, and so on. But no, we as Jews understand that our lives don't begin on the day we're born, and they don't end on the day we die, but they began way before we were born, and they continue way after we leave this world. Because the neshama has a job to do, and it has a job to do before it came into this world. It had a job to do in this world, and it has a great job to do once it leaves this world. And once it leaves this world, sometimes is the time when the neshama has and can have the greatest influence. So today, you might know some of them, but there are thousands of women who carry her name. Her name was Chaya Mushka. So you ask any young Lubavitcher Rebbitzin or young Chabad girl what her name is, and when she says Chaya, she must be a Chaya Mushka. Chaya Mushka is named after the Rebbitzin. There are so many good and wonderful and incredible things that were done after the Rebbitzin's passing that have made her even greater than she was during her life. It's an incredible thing. And we're turning, and Hasidim always looked at a day of a yahrzeit as being not a day of sadness, but rather a day that we can and do think about all the positive things that that person stood for and try to put them into practice. And so today, perhaps, on the Rebbitzins yahrzeit, to think about some of the things that we have mentioned, some that we may not have mentioned, but the things that the Rebbitzin stood for. It was about not worrying about public persona, but worrying about being able to do the right thing, keep our spirituality in a way modest and private, but do the right thing, and doing good things for other people when people don't even know about it. What a wonderful way to go about or think about doing things today and from here on in honor of the way that the Rebbitzin taught us to live our lives. And perhaps then also to think about some of the things that she really stood for. The Rebbitzin was a big campaigner, even in her youth, for girls and women to light Shabbos candles, to make sure that Shabbat candles are lit by all women everywhere, bringing so much more light and the warmth and the joy of Shabbos and Yom Tov into Jewish homes everywhere. So if you know a neighbor who doesn't light Shabbos candles in honor of the Rebbitzin, persuade them to light Shabbos candles. Be strict upon yourself and your children, your daughters, your granddaughters, or whatever about the lighting of Shabbos candles in honor of the Rebbitzin. There are so many things that we can do in honor of this great and incredible yahrzeit. And what we do, I think, by doing all of that, is we bring bracha into the world. As we said before, you tap into a spiritual energy that we don't really understand and we don't really know. It's huge. It's up there. It is waiting for us just to draw it down. And we have the ability to draw it down through our brachas and through our mitzvahs and through our Torah study. We can access and draw down these blessings all the time. And all we've got to do is be there and be the conduit. And you don't necessarily have to know. I mean, it sounds strange, but you don't have to know what you're doing. But you've got to know that you are doing something. And by saying a bracha, and by giving a blessing, and by tapping into that energy, we could be, and we probably are, and I'm sure we are, making a huge, huge difference for ourselves, for our community, and for the whole Am Yisrael, for the whole Jewish people, for the land of Israel, and for all of humanity and all of humankind. So hopefully on this special day, we'll think about, just for a little bit, the life of the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushke Schneerson, and try and take to heart some of the things that she taught us and that she stood for. And not the least of which was to be able to, by the way, there was once an occasion when the woman from the Sheikh Chabad sent a bouquet of flowers to the Rebbetzin. I don't know if it was in a special occasion, maybe for a birthday or whatever. And at that occasion, sending this bouquet, they also attached with it a note. And on the note, they asked for blessings for certain people who weren't well. This one needs a bracha for this illness, this one, whatever. And then I think somebody who needed a blessing for parnosa, that they should be able to earn a living, etc. And they attached this on the note, and they wrote it, and they gave it to the Rebbe. Now, anything that came into the Rebbe's house and the office and whatever, the secretaries would vet, like they would look at it and so on. And they took the bouquet of flowers and they gave to the Rebbetzin. The note they took off and they gave to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe himself took the note and he looked at it. So why are you giving it to me? It's addressed to her. It's addressed to the Rebbetzin. So they said, yeah, but there was like a request for brachas. The Rebbe said she can give brachas too. She's a Rebbetzin. She can also give brachas. And the Rebbetzin kind of empowered us with that as well. You don't have to be a Rebbe to give brachas. You don't have to be a rabbi to give brachas. You don't have to be a Rebbetzin to give brachas. We can give brachas, we can give blessings to each other. And we can certainly give blessings to our whole people. And we can certainly give blessings to the month that's up ahead. And hopefully it will be a month that is filled with the blessing of Simcha that it is best endowed with. And hopefully we will have a great Shabbos Mavorchim, and we'll be able to bless this new month. May it please God be the month of turnaround completely, that the darkness is turned to light, that the sadness is turned to joy, and that pandemics become times of great and wonderful healing. I want to wish you all a great Shabbos and a good Chodesh L'chaim.
L'chaim, and thank you, Rabbi Katz.
Take care and have a good week.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Does anybody know? I just see that Edna has not come on. Is she okay?
She messaged Karen yesterday, and she seemed to be all right.
Okay, a couple of weeks ago, she had kids here from Israel or whatever, but maybe they're still here.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Edna, you there?
There.
Hello, Edna. She's coming on under a pseudonym. Edna, where are you?
He's laughing.
I'm laughing. It's Odette who's laughing.
Odette is laughing. Odette. No, but where's Edna? Is it?
Don't know. I don't know.
Didn't say anything on the chat.
No, but she said she seemed to be she seemed to be vocal there. I thought I heard her. I don't know.
I heard.
I don't know.
Don't know.
Anyway, everybody be well. Please God, everybody should be well, and hopefully we'll hear only good news in the coming week. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbos
Thank you.
Shabbos Shiel.